It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstine Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents and the legal clauses of the sports business media industrial complex. How you doing today, Steve?
I am doing just fine, man. How about you?
Not bad, not bad. Everyday life going on. That's about it.
Oh, we're just sweltering down here in South Texas. Just, and I realize that's what we signed up for and everything, and it's certainly better than being cold, but it's just been abnormally hot down here, unfortunately. I've got this dog, which we're going to see. It'll be another test. How quiet is the dog? He can't be out in 100 degrees, in June. So he has to entertain himself in the house, which can be challenging for a dog of immense energy. He's already been on a 2 mile run this morning. So hopefully he's a little worn out at least.
It keeps you young, I guess. I've often said pets are harder than kids.
Uh, in some respects, they are. I mean, it's kind of like having a permanent 2-year-old.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And especially like when you've got this dog that's living with me now is a giant, very energetic hunting dog who is not happy unless he's constantly doing something, which is a lot like a 3-year-old through to a 3-year-old. Now I think about it, he's
Yes.
just faster than a human 2-year-old.
Yeah, but at least the human two-year-old can somewhat communicate their desires.
but like this dog in walks, it's not like a pleasant walk with your dog and your family around the neighborhood. No, this is like it's a dead-on sprint. It's trying to murder rabbits and squirrels. It's not, there's nothing relaxing about it. He will sprint for half a mile. And if you can't keep up, and I can't sprint a half a mile, so got to stop him. And he's irritated because he stopped. And I counted the 2 nights ago, 2 miles total. He peed 28 times.
Oh God, geez, Louise.
He pooped twice. He sprinted 6/10 of a mile, and he jogged about a little over half a mile. And they only walked of that 2 miles like 8/10 of it. And while he was peeing, he didn't pee while he was sprinting, and so the 28 pees were really condensed into, for the most part, the last mile.
Right.
This is what I'm dealing with.
I assume you do not have a dog walker.
Well, it's me,
Yes, I mean a
a
paid
professional dog
dog
walker.
walker.
No, no,
Yeah.
no. He's got other family and everything who come over during the day, and there's a team. It's a team. It takes a village, in the immortal words of that crooked witch Hillary Clinton.
Um, it
No,
was a
no
it
comment
was
to
a
that,
lit.
huh?
I'm not it. I don't think I've ever been on record as defending Hillary Clinton that much.
I'm just teasing you.
I will say though that was a lifted proverb. It was not something that she coined.
I don't think she coined anything. I don't think nothing Hillary Clinton has in her life is due to her. I'll say that.
I think that's kind of ridiculous, just in the face of human beings going through life. But I take your point. Um, well, we can get Steve even more agitated here as
Oh,
we
good.
we we finally have a closure to a number, really kind of a series of events that have gotten to the point where colleges and universities will be paying directly athletes as the House versus NCAA, not the U.S. House of Representatives, as we talked about last time. Um, it is actually a swimmer, I believe. I can't remember his first name, but he was a swimmer. That was the athlete that is the plaintiff in this case. But that has now all been settled. It was already all settled, but the ink is drying on everything official. And I think we step into the new world order here as soon as July 1.
Yeah. For the record, I hate this. Um, but So this story is all over, but where we have read this was the front office sports memo. Federal judge approves House v. NCAA settlement allowing college athlete pay. This is looks like Amanda Kristovich, I believe, maybe the author, dated June 7th. But again, you can kind of read this all over the place. So yeah, House v. NCAA settlement. House is the swimmer.
Yeah.
It's not anything more complicated. There were three lawsuits. House was the best lawsuit. The three lawsuits got combined in federal court, and it's been going on and on and on. And what's happened now is that the court has approved that the parties approved the settlement. The court has now approved the settlement, and in fact issued a 76-page opinion. If that's not a federal judge, I've never met a federal judge. 76-page opinion. Okay, so what this means, and we've talked about most of this before, but what this means is now college athletes can officially get paid. They are not yet employees. There is going to be a roster limit. Um, uh, the D1 schools can offer up to $20.5 million to all current players in their athletic departments, number that increases incrementally over 10 years during the lifetime of the injunctive relief. Um, it says that the schools must offer money to all sports. Although interestingly, the Department of Education has concluded that these revenue sharing payments are not subject to Title IX. What that means is that what Title IX is the federal law that says universities have to treat women the same as men in terms of collegiate sports. This is why you have a lot of universities have more women's teams than men's teams, because universities have to, uh, you know, spend equal amount of money. They have to treat everybody equally. This settlement is not tied to that, which means then that the Ohio State can pay the football team and the men's basketball team more than all the other sports and not get in trouble for it, which is a key part of this. Now, the column here mentions the Trump-led Department of Education. So I don't know if they're implying without saying it that the Biden DOE might not have done that, but that's that part. Interestingly, now there's also going to be, this is like the thing sure to go wrong here. There is going to be something called the College Sports Commission, which is not tied to the NCAA, which is going to be the enforcement entity. Again, I think things sure to go wrong. So what's the summary here? A summary is settlement approved. Collegiate athletes can get paid by the universities and NIL. There's an enforcement mechanism here. I hate all of this. Chris, your thoughts?
I mean, I think it's a good logical outcome for the reality that we're in. I mean, the horses, the cows, the sheep, the goats, everything's out of the barn. So somehow protecting this ideal of the barn is ridiculous in 2025 America collegiate sports. So I believe, I mean, plenty can go wrong, and a bunch of it will go wrong. But with this much money at stake on all fronts, then this was the only logic. I'm not saying all the specifics of this of the settlement here. Let me be clear about that. But some kind of system-wide reset, which we've been talking about versions of that for 4 years. But this at least allows the playing field for some of that stuff to start to take shape, and for college sports, at least at the Division I level across all sports, we'll go through radical transformation that was already happening and was happening in a completely open field, no rules apply. So if you actually care about the quality of college athletics, I think this is probably a net positive.
My problem is what I've said from the beginning is this is supposed to be amateur athletics.
I know, but Steve,
it's not amateur
that's
athletics
so
anymore. It's
antiquated. That's like saying we should be using coal or riding horse and buggies. I mean, are you a Mennonite? Are you?
I don't think
I mean, it is.
I don't think
What
it's
world
that
have we been in
old-fashioned.
30 years that has existed like this?
What is so wrong with saying you're a college student, you're playing collegiate athletics, you're an amateur athlete?
What's so wrong about taking a horse and buggy to work? Because it lessens because we have less highway deaths and more people live. You can spin that kind of argument any way. You're idealizing a world that does not
Listen,
exist.
I have people every day tell me I need to ride a bike to work. Okay. I mean, it, I
And you
don't.
don't.
Well, no, of course not. But
Exactly.
I don't like the concept of turning collegiate athletics into professional sports.
It's
This is
been
not,
that way for minimum
doesn't mean you need to like
minimum
it. Doesn't mean
25
it's the
years.
right thing to do.
Yeah, okay, but your viewpoint is ridiculous.
I think I have the correct viewpoint. We can disagree with this. It's fine.
In a void that does not exist in the real world.
What is so wrong with
what other business do you count
amateur
in the
athletics?
billions that doesn't understand its labor cost?
It's not labor costs. It's
It's
amateur
how
college students
Steve,
playing
how
a
much
sport.
money is being made on this by a bunch of people? It's obviously a business.
It's a business, but they're college students.
Okay, Steve.
I,
This is really a silly take. I got to be honest with you. It's a
I think
silly
I'm right.
great. You can go be right, and none of it matters. You're not
Well,
in the
no, it
real
doesn't
world.
matter. We're just reporting on what's happened here. None of it, my opinion,
I mean, you
neither
can
of our
like or
opinions
not like
matters.
it, but you understand the reality in which this settlement exists.
Oh, of course, I understand the reality. It does, but I don't have to agree with it.
Yeah, I think you're conflating agree and like. Be honest with you.
I don't agree with it, and I don't like it. Both. I understand the reality of this has been litigated for years and years and years through many different lawsuits, not just this House settlement. There have been prior lawsuits that have been poured out of court. This kind of went the way of the tobacco litigation a little bit. This issue because they got poured out of court multiple times. There were multiple lawsuits about it, and this is the one that finally stuck. And it would point out the most important thing out of all this is that this court did not say that these athletes are employees. Why is that important? That's important because if the universities have employees, there's all kinds of other things that go along with it. Then you've got taxes to be paid. You have arguably some level of benefits to be paid and all of that. So that was not a part of this.
So you
So
would rather have a shadow economy driving, and I'm talking about athletic competition and equity here. Let me be clear. So you're okay with an incomplete shadow economy, which has already driven this for, as a black economy. Now we're into a gray economy with the NIL boosters and all of this. So you're okay with a complete shadow economy that came out of illegal economy driving mass inequity on the athletic playing field, because that's what we have
no,
right now. That's what we have now.
I wasn't okay with the black economy either. I
But
wasn't okay with illegal payments. Why don't we stop that too and create a true amateur athletic system?
okay, so are we taking the profit motive out of the university
I'm totally
media as
fine with the
well?
universities selling the product. I don't think the amateur students need to be paid. Now I will say though that where my line is drawn, I think it's totally okay for student athletes to go do marketing deals. Now, the NCAA has done it in an incredibly stupid way. Okay. I'm just talking about universities paying these students directly. I do think the students, if you can go sign up a deal with the local car wash or with Coca Cola or whatever the case may be, I don't know if the university should have any sort of complaints about it.
I
Okay.
think it was
My
the
line is just talking about the universities paying their students.
I think it was the athletic article on this that actually it even said with it. So to me, you're advocating for the system as it currently exists.
Well, no, because I hate the way the NIL system is set up
Right.
is
So that's
incredibly
what I'm getting
stupid.
at. That's what I'm getting at. But you're
Okay.
basically at its core operating model advocating for the what currently exists, or with the caveat that let's fix basically a version of the system we're in now. The
I would say
athletic
the latter, fix the version of the
Yes.
system we're now.
So the athletic article does point out that even in the system as we live now, it's still a relatively small percentage, not insignificant. So, kind of like, let's call it a third. We can go and dig it out, but I'm basically in the ballpark. A third of that money distributed is coming from even at the big, like, Adidas, Coke level, are coming from those kind of arrangements. Everything from the car wash to the Adidas or Nike, whatever. Um, make up about a third of the payments going out, which means majority, that's a very fair statement, is through NIL collectives and essentially the making official the illegal booster network that has existed in college sports for what, let's say 30 years, 40
Probably
years.
more. I mean,
But
probably
let's say maybe
more
a
like 40 or 50.
significant amount, right? Where it
Yeah.
wasn't just like Bubba paying the lineman.
Right.
Um, so what would you do? So in the fix it scenario, what would be the way in which you protected players' free market ability to earn off their NIL and their talents and abilities, essentially, is what we're talking about, and not be paid directly by the colleges? What's your middle path here then?
Okay. So number one, you have to close the transfer portal, because that's just outright bribery. That's step number one. And
But don't you
so
think this current deal now gives actually the universities better footing to implement those things now because they can manage fixed labor costs? They know what those are going to be
no,
with roster because that's
I
what the
mean,
roster limits is that.
I think you don't need that to get this done. Okay. Because I fundamentally disagree wholeheartedly with universities paying college students for athletics at all. So I'm going to, and what I'm talking about, I'm going to leave that out. I understand your point. I'm going to leave it out. One, you close the transfer portal and that eliminates bribery. Two, I think you have to have more stringent rules and an enforcement mechanism wherein if a party who is going to sign one of these marketing arrangements is a booster, then they cannot participate. In other words, if the local car wash dude qualifies as a legal definition of a booster for the university, then that just isn't going to happen. And I recognize, I know what you're about to say. No, national companies not applicable, but I realize like your local car wash or your local, pick your Chinese restaurant or whatever. Um, those businesses are local, and so they probably are boosters. Well, if you want to sign a marketing deal, you're just not going to you can't be a booster. I think I don't know how you get around it. And so I think you close the transfer portal, eliminate boosters, um, and keep universities out of it. I think that would be fine.
If you could show me the path how you would do that under the pre July 1st, last, let's call it probably what, let's last 6 or 7 years reality. I can't remember when that original Supreme Court ruling that then the NCAA
Yeah, I don't think
wiped
it's been
away all
6 or 7 years, but a couple years, certainly. Yeah.
I think it's four at least.
Right. Probably. Yeah.
Um, so in that window, how I still would need because I ultimately in some kind of boy in the bubble John Travolta world, I'm not that far off from you about the understanding of that some of these things are there, and for good reasons, and now yes, I do acknowledge that what this does is completely rip off any band-aid around the sort of fallacy of college athletics being an amateur
Yes,
pursuit.
it does.
Anything above intramural level, which we've talked about before, is going to get a real big boost here over these next couple of years in terms of being
Yep.
important on campus. So I'm not saying that. Oh, I'm not defending that. This is somehow like the best legislative and judicial way to preserve college athletics amateurism or anything like that. I understand that this is the stake in the heart of college D1 college athletics being even have a whiff of amateurness. It's gone. It's done. As of July 1st, that world does not exist. So I do acknowledge that. And I see I'm somewhat closer to your viewpoint in a bubble, but I just don't. I didn't. I had have to see what would be the oversight process that would actually legislate things like the portal going away, reining in the boosters. Like no
Well,
one
that's a
has
million dollar
showed that.
question. That's
Right,
a million dollar question. I mean, I recognize,
$1 billion question.
yeah, billion dollar, not $1 million. $1 billion, a million is jump change. The NCAA obviously is incapable, and it will say that the front office sports story mentioned that this college sports commission that they created is not an NCAA.
No, it's distinctly independent of it.
Yeah, and there's no explanation as to what that really means or what,
And where who they report to. Like that is a
if
big
anyone.
I tripped over like, well, okay, so this just exists, but
Yeah,
it
who
has
are
we
they?
don't know
Who
its
appoints
governing
them?
structure.
Yeah, who who appoints their board of directors?
Yeah.
It could be totally corrupt. So I don't know. We don't know if this is the answer. And so
Our
I
shared mistrust of anonymous commissions.
yes, probably shared mistrust of commissions. Period, for that matter. um, it seems like where you and I totally disagree, and you think my position is silly, is when it comes to the universities actually paying these students. You're for that. I'm against that. I think that's the fundamental nature of our disagreement. We probably agree on the rest of it.
I am, yeah, that's probably fair. I am for forward-looking, realistic, systems level, operation systems level structure that we can at least call this what it is, and then let the business. And you're gonna listen. You're gonna see it's going to be so fascinating. Well, one, just as some, but I'm just, status quo it was death. So I'm basically pro blowing up the status quo here as my sort of
I am
disruptor.
too. We've talked about this for
Yeah.
years.
So, and I think this is actually your most viable path to that. So I'm excited about what comes next. But what you're going to see, which is not a, I'm not trying to convince you because this probably leans into your fears and what you don't like, is but you're going to see universities, you're going to see somebody between the university president or whatever the head honcho is in their structure of the university and the athletic director. And that's going to be a CEO of university sports business, right? And those people are going to come from big media. They're going to come from probably some of these big boosters. They're going to come from the university system or the conference systems. Ex Big Ten head. Et cetera, et cetera. But you're going to start to see, your Penn States, your Michigans, and you might see this within the next year to 18 months. There'll be CEOs of sports business, the business of our sports basically at a big university, and they will be a layer, and they'll be kind of a quasi public private relationship that is going to be out there dealing with real estate for stadiums and all the kind of basically all the type of stuff we see professional leagues do, and there'll be a whole operational layer there.
Well, first of all, they're already trending that direction with bringing in GMs
Yeah,
because
but
that's really
these
what
would
you're
be
getting
their
at. But
people's bosses
no, I
ultimately.
get it. But in terms of the stadiums, not so much. I mean, they're already doing that. Okay. I mean, they're already building stadiums. These public universities, it's public land, owned by, the university,
Well,
which is an offshoot of the
not in the
state.
private, not in
I get it.
Duke.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, in the private area, the university is already dealing with purchasing property and getting stadiums built. They're already doing all that. So I don't necessarily think the real estate part of it is going to necessarily change from what it
Well, I
is.
don't like. Let's take Duke, and I know they're not. There's no. I'm just taking them because they're an interesting example. They're not looking to get a new arena. But let's say when and if they wanted a new arena, they're going to be looking at the same sort of Duke commercial footprint that a professional stadium that goes up is going to be
They're
looking
already
like.
doing that, though. I don't know how that part
Because
changes.
they're going to need because they're going to need to be bringing in more revenue. So they're going to need to. I mean, those things might be happening, but there's going to be an internal demand to 10, 20x those things because what we're going to see here is the cost of all this is
I
just going
mean,
to skyrocket.
technically speaking, they don't need to increase revenue because they already have it. They need to increase revenue if they want to keep their university profits while still having to pay the
Well, sure.
players,
Well, yes, and that's they're going to
for
need
the
some.
record.
There's going to be roles within the university hierarchy that have to manage that.
Yes. Now, how do you do that? I mean, these universities already have sponsors, marketing deals. What you're really talking about isn't really a fundamental change so much as just plussing it up to a newer, bigger heights because they're already doing what you're suggesting.
Right, but the same level of like this will now be more overt now because now this also gives these universities more leeway just like it does the players. It also gives the universities they can now be more aggressive in their business dealings. And this is where we'll start to see things like, are there new leagues? How do the conferences readjust? How do different states deal with collective bargaining, and how do they, all kinds of things around down the chain that this will, I'm not saying that the rule favor or anti, but these are questions that will arise. So because these have, especially at the state universities, these have to jive with whatever is the, state laws around these things and the relationships. It is for good, ill, bad, mixed bag, whatever. It's going to have, this is waves, ripple effects that are like constantly dropping large boulders into a lake.
Yeah,
It's going to ripple for years.
I believe you just said something we kind of glazed over. I believe this column in here says something about collective bargaining. I believe it says something about the possibility of collectively bargaining in the future. I'm trying to flip through here and find it here.
It definitely opens up the door to that question.
Yeah, which is just, and that's obviously not good for anybody. Collective bargaining, just Jesus in college sports. I I can't. I hate it. Like I said, I can't find it. But anyway, I certainly this opinion opens that up. That's obviously the future. You're going to see, collectively bargained salaries, and I think college sports is. To me, college sports is a joke. I think it's a laughable joke. It's
I don't
not
think it
college
can be
sports.
more of a joke than it's been for the last 20 years. I think it's already, I think college sports has already bottomed out. It's already hit
Well,
rock
we've been
bottom.
talking about. I agree. I don't disagree with you. We've been talking about that for years too.
Right.
We're not that far off. The part that we're off on again is that you're okay with the universities paying the players. I'm not okay with the university paying the player. That's the only thing we really disagree on here. Now, what the path forward is, I this is just the beginning. Now you're going to see arguments over how much can they pay. The it's going to go up. There's going to be arguments over roster. This column goes into roster spots in
Well, that
here.
they said that was the thing that hung between these, basically, and because this plan's in place. The plan that's going to move forward. That's why it's starting July 1st. All the players behind the scenes were just waiting for this ruling. Everything that's going to happen, at least in the next 6 months, has already been pre-negotiated, and is ready to roll. And they said that the bit that delayed that was actually all kinds of roster limits, because that actually has implications for men's, well, football, is the biggest one. But then how do you beg, borrow, and steal across your your athletic portfolio? And what's a roster spot? On the gymnastics team or whatever, does that go? Probably goes from 4 to 2 or whatever. There's all kinds of negotiation to make those roster limit numbers work across the system.
Well, yeah, I mean, because obviously now, if for people don't realize this, college teams are way bigger than professional teams in terms of number of people currently as today, a number of people on the roster. College football teams are massive. Well, and so the issue here is that if these players have to be paid, then there has to be some limits placed on the roster level because universities are not going to pay more people than they have to.
It
So
also
that's what we're
mandates
talking about
that
here.
all players that take a roster spot in a D1, I guess, is the easiest shorthand, but however they're defining this, is has to be on at least a partial scholarship. So it actually get one thing that this sort of does is it guarantees partial scholarship for any roster holder within the university system, which is, and it starts to limit things like walk-ons and stuff like that. I mean, there's a whole like downstream of just how you actually build teams that is also just pretty completely radicalized by this.
Well, yeah, and I would that probably affects football and basketball less, but a lot of these other sports, there's a lot of walk-ons and a lot of non-scholarship, players on like the
Yeah.
baseball team and
Now they
pick
all
your
they all have to be at least partially scholarshiped.
yeah, and I think that radically changes things from a financial standpoint, it's going to take a couple years to really figure out let the downstream impacts of this um really form, well, I don't know what the word the downstream impacts really take effect. It's going to be a
Yeah.
while.
There
The
are
impact of
whole
this on like the women's lacrosse team or whatever. Pick your downstream sport.
yeah. Um yeah, there's going to be a ton of intended and unintended consequences.
Tell you what, people, let us know if you think I'm right or Chris is right. Are you in favor of universities having to pay their players, or are you not in favor of it? I suspect I'm in the minority, and that's fine, but let us know.
Uh, yes, and I think my case is made. All right, well, Steve, I'll give you another opportunity to beat up on unions. Then I guess
It's one of my favorite things to do.
as the FBI apparently is sniffing around the Major League Baseball player union. I don't know about some company contract, One Player Inc. or what's the name of the
It's one
company that
team,
One Team?
one
Yes,
team.
which is the articles that I think we looked at multiple articles on. Like I think I looked at the ESPN one. You looked at what a Front Row Sports.
Well, no, well, I looked at front office sports. You can it was the way you can read this is it's linked through MSN. That's how I eventually found it because this one office sports things we keep preaching to you is actually uh fairly tough to if it's not in the email, it's kind of tough. But okay, so here's the point. It's one team is what it is. If I didn't just say that. So the issue here, and what I'm reading is called "Everything You Need to Know About the MLBPA One Team Investigation" by Margaret Fleming. This came out on the 6th of June. Okay, the FBI is involved. Congratulations, Major League Baseball Players Union. The executive director is Tony Clark, who we've talked here before. So they have an agreement with something called One Team Partners, which is a licensing arm founded by both the MLBPA and the NFLPA. And it also represents a bunch of other unions. So the allegation here is that One Team has been paying Tony Clark and others with the MLBPA, and they are doing illegal things with the money, meaning keeping it instead of using the money for union benefit. Now, um, the National Football League Players Union, as this column claims, that they on their own, there's no allegations that the NFLPA has done anything wrong. They did their own investigation. They concluded there's no corruption. So this is just apparently limited only to Major League Baseball, for the record. So first of all, if anybody's shocked about this, you know, I think you need not be quite so naive. I'm not even just talking about unions. I'm not a fan of unions, but the point is, um, prominent business people taking money and doing what they're not supposed to is not exactly news. Um, so the real point here is that the FBI is involved. And so when the FBI is involved, they're talking about money laundering. You're talking about interstate commerce because it's a federal investigation, through banks. Anything through a bank is going to be interstate commerce. And so that is what it is. The where does it go from here part it's in this column. The key point is that the collective bargaining agreement with Major League Baseball expires on December 1st, 2026, meaning next December. And so if there's controversy with Tony Clark, it's right in time for union negotiations. That is the real news here. And so if Tony Clark has to go, and there's no allegation, there's no reporting that he is so far, but he has to go. It is right in time for union negotiations, and they're already, by the way, talking about lockouts, work stoppages. The union has already got a war chest set up of reserves to pay their players. So it just throws a monkey wrench into the union negotiations. But the basic allegation here, like I said, is that Tony Clark and others are taking money from One Team Partners and essentially keeping it and doing the wrong thing with it. That's the basic allegation. Your thoughts?
I think you already raised what is probably the most interesting or even relevant part of the story, which is, the upcoming labor renegotiations and the and we've done this story before, and all of the drumbeat of narratives leading up to say that that's not going to be it's going to be a noisy negotiation. Let's just leave it at that. And so I think this is just part of that. ongoing drip drip of back and forth. And you know, do I do when we're talking about millions and billions of dollars changing hands, are there greased palms in most industries? And do large unions have enough of a history of being bad actors there to somewhat earn their reputation? Sure. Um, do Are we talking about like some slice of, where a judge eventually is going to have to decide whether someone was within or without outside of the law? Probably. But I find this to be planted stories, headline hunting by the FBI. I don't think this actually is super credible. I think this is just, throwing rocks over the walls in a coming war.
I mean, I don't know if we know enough to know whether it's credible or not credible. I understand your point. It could be a planted story. The FBI certainly has done stuff like that before. Don't know. Um, Now, what this story does mention is that there was also a National Labor Relations Board complaint filed against Tony Clark. It says in late November, an anonymous person alleged self-dealing nepotism, misuse of union resources, and abuse of power. They accused the whistleblower accused Clark of getting jobs for family members, including his daughter, improperly giving him financial benefits, and said the union sent large delegations to Australia and Las Vegas for non-baseball business. Um, and so that is out there, and there's no indication that the NLRB has ruled on that yet. So, but this is just kind of another thing. Um, I don't know whether it's credible or not. Um, as much as I dislike unions, obviously this sort of thing has gone on through all facets of business. Certainly not limited to unions. Corruption is not limited to unions, and so whether or not this is an MLB created story, whether the FBI is just trying to bash the union, it's a bit unknown. I'm not willing to say it has no credibility, and I'm also not willing to say it's credible either one because I don't think we have enough information.
Yeah, I would definitely I think that's where we're at with this. And let me be clear,
We
if
don't. Somebody may. We
right.
don't have it.
Yeah, or or two sides are certainly gathering their evidence to make their case. Is I think where we're at some point. And I'm not saying this is going to ever go to trial or whatever, but they'll have their small moments leading up to
Oh,
something.
listen. So this is okay. This is an investigation. What theoretically, if the FBI turned over, if the FBI came up with real evidence of corruption, again, it would be something along the lines of money laundering. Um, and so then they turn it over to the Department of Justice. That is going to take years. So we're talking about like 2 or 3 years, probably realistically, I would say, before anything serious happened. So that what I think what Chris, your point is, this could be an attempt by somebody to discredit the union leadership right before the MLB contract negotiations, and
It
therefore put the union in a lesser position. Is that possible? Yes, that's happened before.
Yeah, it's certainly now, what you think of what's his face here's effectiveness as a union boss for Major League Baseball players. Um, you certainly don't want a change of leadership a year out from those actually probably 6 months to those negotiations
Right.
beginning in earnest. So, so if you're just, if you're kind of if you're either side and you have an opportunity to weaken the other side by taking out leadership, that just art of war type stuff, take all the specifics out of it, that's something you would attempt to do.
Well, yeah, your point is sort of a hypothesis,
Yes, of course.
and so we'll need to see what evidence there is of it. Would it surprise me too much? No, absolutely would not.
But even
Um,
if there's some legitimacy, this is also one of those things that's on a chip on the table that can be taken off the table as part of negotiation. Hey, make that investigation go away, and as part of getting to a deal.
sure. Well, yeah, absolutely. And I will say that we've said this on the show before, but um, Major League Baseball Players Association has been the most effective professional sports union.
And they got to fund that war chest somehow. Some of this money might not be going into leadership pockets. Some of it could also be being funneled into things like that war chest. I mean, I think what the most prescient point is we have now seen stories over the last like couple shows of both sides of this coming battle, kind of loading up for bear, right? Getting their resources together, getting their evidence together, getting their, defense and offense sort of set up on the field of battle. I mean, that is what is clear through a whole series of these stories.
Because the question would be, who was the anonymous whistleblower? It could be a union member. It could also be someone in the Major League Baseball offices.
Yeah. Or the union's office.
Well, sure.
Yeah, like
so. Could be somebody who's trying to hungry for power and wants to displace Tony Clark.
Yeah, or just has an axe to grind or whatever.
Or maybe they're legitimately reporting legitimate bad stuff by a union member or by the union boss. We don't really know.
And all those things can be true too.
Yes. All those things could be simultaneously true.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive.
Now the difference, here, I think, when you're a union boss, ideally, don't commit crimes, obviously, but your primary focus ought to be on what's best for the union member, right? And anything that's not that is going to make people unhappy. And so if people see Tony Clark's daughter employed and they're going on a trip to Australia and everything, even if it's legitimate, it may irritate people. And that alone could be the cause of these reporting. We really don't know.
Yeah. And you do have to live in some of those positions. You have to live a little bit extra clean, right? You have to be sort of ethics plus, because you don't want to give opposition, those inroads. And so if there's all, whiffs of impropriety, I think then you got to go from there.
But anyway, so I think what's next here is we need to see if actual evidence leaks out of this at some point. And if there is legitimate evidence of Tony Clark corruption, would it surprise me? Absolutely not. Would I tend to think it's probably true, but don't know. So,
and when does the union take out their own leader, right? Like to say, hey, there's just too much smoke here. The easiest thing, maybe sooner than later, is the union I don't know what the exact process of governance they have, but like no confidence or removal. Members probably have some degree of power there.
Who's the teamster that's buried under Giant Stadium? Probably
Jimmy Hoffa.
Jimmy Hoffa. Yeah, Jimmy Hoffa says hello. I mean, so Jimmy Hoffa was killed by somebody, but there were all kinds of allegations of corruption and everything, and somebody took out Jimmy Hoffa because of his actions as union leader. I'm not saying somebody's going to take Tony Clark out. I'm simply saying that it may be that somebody's after Tony Clark's job. It may be that somebody's trying to destabilize the union in time for negotiations. Maybe that Tony Clark's legitimately corrupt. We don't know.
Right. And if just making Tony Clark goes away is best for the union, and that could happen, and that would be a victory point for the owners.
Yes, and that's entirely possible.
So if they're playing Settlers of Catan, they get 2 victory points. All right, Steve. Kind of well, we got a couple more maybe here, but Curry, what is Vince Curry, right?
Steph Curry.
I was gonna.
Where'd you get Vince?
What is it? Del Curry's his dad, right?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know.
And then the brother is who's the other Curry?
I don't even know. You already got me confused on first names of just 2, Steve. Now you're adding a third to the mix.
Yeah, you're gonna make me look it up. Keep going. Continue.
Steph Curry. There was an article in CNBC about his company, Inc. 30 or 30 Inc. or something along those lines. I can look in a
30
minute.
Inc.
30 Inc. So basically it's wow, Steph Curry is such a successful businessman. He has built this 30 Inc. company, and I think they were reporting 175 million plus profit.
Million, yeah.
And then 144 EBITDA. Yeah, whatever that
EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes.
Yeah.
And I can't remember.
It's a smarter way to get to what their actual take-home profit
earnings was. Before interest, taxes, debt, and something.
Right. So
it's basically net profits.
Yeah. So if you look at either of them in context, they're impressive numbers for a business, which is really, which I think the article does a good job of describing actually, is that this is an umbrella business. So this is Steph Curry Inc., let's call it for a second. I think the article even does something similar. So if Steph Curry Inc. is the umbrella, then there's 5 or 6 different companies that fall under that, and different, mostly in, footwear, clothes, celebrity branding, those type of things, kind of celebrity brands, and that he's done very well with that. And the article is like, good job, Steph Curry.
I've been trying to find his name of his brother because it's really, really bugging me.
Maybe it's Vinny.
It's not Vinny. It's definitely not Vinny Curry. Okay, so um, and we're gonna find this before the end of the show. Um, so this is on CNBC. Steph Curry's 30 Inc. generated 174 million in revenue last year, and all of its businesses are profitable. Company says by Alex Sherman, one of our favorites, old standby, dated June 5th. So I think it's safe to say that this entire business is built on Steph Curry branding deals. And so, there's not a lot of overhead here with this thing. 30 Inc. is sort of the master um, Steph Curry holding company. And underneath that, there are some other non-branding stuff in here, but most of it's branding. Um, it owns companies called Unanimous Media, Gentleman's Cut Bourbon, underrated golf and basketball, and others. And the biggest one here is the partnership with Under Armour. Um, Apparently, Curry, I didn't know this, but Curry's the president of Curry Brand, which is the company's basketball and footwear apparel brand. Um, Curry has 8.8 million Under Armour common shares, which was valued at the time in 2023 at $75 million. But it's not just branding stuff in here. There's a production company of some type he has, and there's a couple. The bourbon thing isn't strictly a branding deal. You got to applaud the guy for this, don't you? I mean, there's so many professional athletes that are total morons who waste all their money, whereas he has done this right. And even people as successful as him have wasted hundreds of millions of dollars. So I applaud him for forming a business and getting it organized in a way that works.
Yeah,
Right?
I agree with that. It's an interesting case study. I think there's a lot of, actually, if we, get out of the news cycle and stuff we've talked about over time, which is how do athletes build a larger business brand? There's precedents for this in terms of diversifying a bunch of investments and being hands-on enough and then hiring the right people. So, is he
Seth Curry, that's the brother.
there you go,
Oh
Seth
God,
Curry.
I'm feel much
Um,
better now.
but let's, a couple things. One, it's not that shocking that he would be in amongst the forefront of people thinking about this.
It's a
Simply,
little shocking.
not really. I mean, his father was Del Curry. He played in the NBA for what, 12, 15 years? I mean, I'm just
Doesn't
saying,
mean that either
no,
one
but
of them know anything about money.
he, yeah, true. But was he around money most of his life? And does being around
He's
money
not the
and
typical person from
right,
the
that's what I'm
hood
saying. Like,
who's
so it's
right.
it's not strange that this would these kind of second generation wealth know money in a different way. That's pretty standard. And there are anomalies, I grant you, but like if you look at social conditioning, he comes, if he does, let's say his dad was a investment venture capital guy, and then he became also a successful venture capital guy, and then went on to do even bigger things. That's not strange from that vantage point that it would be Steph Curry that's doing this. And we have to be very clear here that this is really this, he's got one sweetheart deal with Under Armour,
Under
because
Armour.
this article goes out of its way a number of times to say, really, one of the reasons he can say things like all my companies are profitable, show that level of
Because they could
earnings.
all fail, and the Under Armour thing would keep them all profitable as a whole.
Well, they're not paying for their, probably not paying for their accounting services. They're not paying for
Also,
merchant
it's not a lot of overhead because
No,
Under
not at all.
Armour's
So
doing it all.
it's a bunch of money that he gets to play with and invest and build new companies with, and then all of those companies underneath the Steph Curry umbrella have service agreements, probably with whole chunks of operational costs that are bundled within that contract.
Probably so. And Under Armour's making the shoes and the clothes, doing all the marketing, doing the accounting. All Curry has to do is essentially attach his name to it all.
Yeah, and even
in
something
the
like a
story.
sports drink, which I think is in his portfolio, even if obviously,
It's with someone else, and there's
yeah,
someone
it's
else
all
is doing the
through the
sports drink.
networking and the boys club and the, being within the corporate fold and who you have lunch with and stuff like that. So I would say that this and now has he done amazing things taking, it's almost like, and I don't mean this in a Del Curry way, but it's almost like, people that come from a good amount of wealth, they get that starter money that they can go make their way in the world with. Some fail and blow it all, and some, leverage that into bigger and better things. And so I think that's kind of in some way the Under Armour's daddy here. And Steph Curry's been remarkably successful in taking daddy's investment and doing good things with it. And it looks like it's a little bit further down in the article, but they give the article gives credits to really probably who is the sort of true business innovator here is this person Suresh Singh, who actually helped him take something called SC30 to 30 Inc. So this Suresh Singh has been the kind of creative business innovator who has basically rode shotgun with Steph Curry and built transition from whatever kind of BS thing he had before into something that's actually pretty worthwhile.
Well, all these guys have somebody like
Yeah.
that, right? There's
But they
always
don't
some
often get
actual.
named, right? Like, so that to me is a big part of this. They're silent. This article does call this person out.
Yeah, well, like LeBron James has Maverick Carter, and we can disagree if you know. I don't like LeBron James, but regardless, Maverick Carter, Kobe Bryant had a partner. What's that sports drink that was Kobe was a part of? There was the business guy was behind that. Um, most of the yes, his name is Suresh Singh. Yeah, so he's apparently 30 Inc.'s secretary slash chairman. That is his role here, and so it's safe to say that Suresh Singh is running the business on a day to day level. For him while Steph Curry's playing basketball every day. So that's how it works. But most of these people have this. So the key, I think, what we've learned here is to find one, you have to have the right mentality. And there's been people from the hood that have also gotten this done too, by
Oh,
the way.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just probably a harder road. And I do agree with you that the fact that Seth Curry had his father, who, even if his father wasn't great with money, at least he was around money. And, I don't know if Del Curry was good or bad. We don't know.
Even if he
Um,
was mediocre, like even if
he's
he's a
he's
normal
used to
human being
seeing
managing
money,
their own money,
right?
I'm gonna look this up. He played in the NBA for a long time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He was a career player for sure, certainly. Okay. So Chris is trying to figure out how long Del Curry. Here's the question today: how long was Del Curry in the NFL or in the NBA? Okay. So one other company, while Chris is looking up, one other company that's down the 30 Inc. Chain here is something called Universal Unanimous Media. Um, um, and they apparently have a 4 year. Uh, they are 4 years into a contract with Comcast, NBC Universal, which is Peacock. Um, it doesn't say what specific products they're providing, but safe to say that Unanimous Media is producing some sort of broadcasting material for Peacock. Did you find it yet, Chris?
Yeah, he played 16 years in the NBA
Long
from
time.
86 to 2002. He played for Utah, Cleveland, Charlotte, which is where that's where he played for I think like 9 years. That was where he sort of made his bones, so to speak. Milwaukee, and then he finished with 3 years in Toronto.
Okay,
So
so obviously in the 80s and 90s, there wasn't nearly as much money in contracts as there are now. And so Del Curry was not making $100 million,
no, but he was probably
as
pulling
his.
down 8 to 10 million over the course
Yes,
of
well, that
that.
was what I was about to
Yeah.
say is, he did have some money. So certainly it's a leg up, obviously there's no debating that. So, the question of the day with all these things obviously is how long will this last once Steph Curry's out of the NBA and his star fades a little bit? Is this something that's going to die on the vine when his endorsement doesn't mean as much? We'll see. There's a handful of people who continued. Obviously, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Peyton Manning. There's been some that stay, but there's been a lot of people that once they get out of professional sports, all this kind of work stops. So we'll have to see. I suspect that Steph Curry is probably lesser than all those people I just mentioned in terms of public spotlight.
Yes. Kind of just quickly seeing if Daddy Dell did anything of note in his post career. Nothing that isn't like typical. There's a charitable foundation in there. Which
Well, he
that's
also spent a lot of time with the kids doing basketball because Steph and his brother Seth both made the NBA, and I'm sure Daddy had a lot to do with that.
yes, for sure. But it looks like it was in started a school, whatever. He did.
He
This.
didn't go to his corporate job at
No, yeah,
Coca
or
Cola or
start
whatever.
businesses himself or whatever.
No,
He took a
no.
fairly typical post athlete career path. One little interesting tidbit about his personal life, though, that is like one sentence on his Wikipedia, but like is probably a good 2 hour Lifetime movie. On August 23rd, 2021, Curry and his wife Sonia, who I assume is Steph's mom, announced they are divorcing after 33 years of marriage. That was in August of 2021. He remarried in about 2023.
Hmm. Wonder what that could have been about.
Yeah, yeah,
Anybody like to speculate? I'd like
yeah.
to speculate about the demise of Del Curry's original
33
marriage.
years. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not a small
Is
marriage.
is it possible that there was infidelity
Yeah.
involved? I don't know. We were not there. I can take a stab at it though. Imagine that the professional basketball player not being totally faithful. Stunning. Yeah. Okay. I think we've covered this here, but point is 30 Inc. If you see the name 30 Inc., that is Steph Curry. You see the name unanimous media. I said anonymous before. I meant unanimous media. That is also Steph Curry, and it's going to be tied to Peacock slash NBC
I think
slash
they got. I
Comcast.
now don't have it right in front of me, but they got some like a documentary that's coming out relatively soon. Like they actually have pieces of because lots of people have production companies, and then
Yeah,
like
but he has a deal with NBC Universal though. There's a
yeah, but
difference.
still, some that doesn't mean things make it to air. But he's got something that company's got something coming to the digital airwaves here. I think in the next couple months, even, which is probably one of the reasons why articles like this start getting planted.
Probably so, realistically, because look, we're talking about it.
Yeah, right.
You
So
know,
suddenly, so when Del Curry, when Steph Curry's movie that his production Unanimous Media puts out, there's been you're sort of people are aware that you even had a company at all.
now the unanimous media deal was signed in 2018, and it says it. Let me back up. Unanimous Media was launched in 2018, has been profitable every year, and they're 4 years into the NBC Universal deal, and it has already been renewed once. So they have produced something. We just don't know what it is, but there's obviously been content produced that's made to air. Otherwise, they wouldn't have renewed the deal.
Yeah, I've talked to some friends and colleagues in the sort of documentary business, and they said one of the only things that's getting green lit or that you can move forward are actually sports documentaries, and that's because a lot of these platforms, because all the reasons we talk about sports being a driver, it also means you need downstream content. So like sports docs across ESPN, across all the streamers, et cetera, are actually one of the few documentary subject types that are actually getting green lit.
Speaking of, and randomly, have you watched Becoming Led Zeppelin yet?
I haven't. I haven't. I'm not a
I
big
watched like half of it, and
I'm
I
not a big
it
Zeppelin
got too late.
guy, but I was like I might hit play on that.
Oh yeah, it's apparently really what I saw was really really good. Again, I saw about half of it, and it got too late for me. But it's
Is
on
it?
Netflix.
Yeah, I saw they're selling it hard, so I saw it pop up. So they have good footage. That's what.
Yeah, well, they had an unheard interview with John Bonham.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I might hit play.
it goes into the background of everybody in the band and their influences,
The
and
new Yardbirds era.
well, before that, like all of them in the British version of high school, and how they, Jimmy Page talked about the kid who got him into guitar, and the first recording he ever did, and all. It was super interesting.
That is an area of overlap with your more hard rock. Although I can hard rock, but you're more hard rock centered, and I think as I've
Yes.
shown over the last couple of episodes, have a little bit more of a '60s British invasion focus. This is actually where those things overlap.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. But we're getting away from sports business, but I had to mention that.
Yeah. All right, Steve. Quiet
I have no idea
weeks.
what time we're at here because of my clock reset. So I don't know what broadcast time we're at all. Hopefully you do.
No idea.
We don't know at all. We have no idea how long we've gone here.
But
Sorry.
you do have an idea about what's been going on at the Hogsty.
Yes, I do. Oh, and
Trey
by the way,
Hendrickson
I wanted
watch.
a real quick mention that Pacman Jones got in trouble
Oh,
again. Shock of shocks. I forgot. He's arrested for the 185th millionth time uh,
dog
for
bites man.
for similar stuff, public intoxication and in assaulting police officers and all this stuff. And it's really easy to get in trouble like that. Once you start arguing with police about them, the fact that they're arresting you, you're going to get charges like assaulting police officers. So that's probably what it is. It's just another string, yet another felony charge for someone who is a horrible, terrible human being. And he's been convicted of a million different things. So anyway, so that's Pacman Jones.
He
We could
even
talk.
rehabbed himself once and then they kind of,
He got
threw
arrested
that
several
away.
times
Yeah.
after that too. Yeah, he's just a terrible person. I mean, don't model yourself after Pacman Jones, kids. Not a good idea. So the Hogsty. So yeah, so we were in the heart of the dead zone here in the Hogsty. By the time you listen to this, I will have published an article about punting, which can only happen in June when I can't think of anything else at all to write about in punting. So we are waiting on training camp. We will cover all of that on the Hogside podcast, and we have all of our regular written content, which, by the way, includes our position group breakdown series, in which we are filling time and in space, and also covering each position group post draft, post free agency. So all that's on hogside.com.
Hopefully the in future NFL union negotiations we can do away with this fallacy of the voluntary OTAs in
It's
this
so dumb.
it's just this constant dance every time this time of the year, and it's absolutely ridiculous, and it would be such an easy fix, and hopefully we can figure out that this is a
Well,
stupid thing.
look, just make it mandatory. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, newsflash: NFL being an NFL player is not that difficult from a schedule perspective. You're off in January. The season doesn't start until September. The least you can do, Marshawn, looking at you, Marshawn Lattimore, the least you can do is show up for a few weeks of OTAs that are, by the way, non-contact.
Right, but it's to me it's a league issue because they
Of
well
course it
the
is. It's a league issue. Of
yeah,
course,
yeah. They
just it's
or league
mandatory. Period.
union, they got to sort it out. But this is so dumb. This should just be mandated. You come here, and then you can say you're allowed to have open hours, and players can come use the facilities and these parameters, and just move on with our lives.
Right. And you're 6 to 7 months off every single year. You can take a couple weeks and head to the camp and practice some football. It's
Yeah.
not that tough, people.
Uh, there we go. All right, we'll see you in 2 weeks.